season, which has not led anywhere near the Super Bowl in recent years, and now the Super Bowl is beyond us, and now every team around the National Football League preparing for their offseason, trying to enhance their rosters in whatever way that they can, and with the new regime in place, now the Bears get their opportunity to try to chart their course with Ben Johnson.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about what the Combine means to the Bears organization, because we haven't talked since the end of the season. The Eagles have won a Super Bowl championship since then, and the Bears have a new head coach in Ben Johnson. What does the NFL Scouting Combine signify for the Bears organization with the new leadership now on the football field?
I would say the position the Bears are in going into this Combine feels a bit unique because you have a general manager who's been in place for 3 years in Ryan Poles, and so a lot of this roster, really this entire roster at the moment, is the image that Ryan Poles had in place. But now you bring in a new head coach, a highly touted former coordinator who's running the best offense in football the last couple of seasons with the Detroit Lions. And so how much of that give and take, how much of that conversation between Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson, if there are things that really Ben Johnson feels will suit his vision of this roster, then how much give and take is there between Poles and Johnson to make some adjustments, because there are certain contracts in place. That's where the Combine can really be a big deal for the Bears this week. All these prospects who are going to take to the field, that's a part of it with the enhanced physical evaluation and the measurables. But then, of course, you also factor in the opportunity that'll be there to meet these prospects in person. And there are 3 out of the top 41 picks in this draft cycle that the Bears have access to. You anticipate all 3 of those players, and who knows, if you wheel and deal, maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less, but you have a chance to bolster your roster.
Bears in a good position as we get ready for the NFL draft coming up at the end of April. Let's go live to Indianapolis, home to every NFL Scouting Combine since 1987. Another Combine meant another visit to St. Elmo's for Cassie Carlson to clear out the cobwebs, right?
Exactly, and I think we might be going back tonight. That's like a tradition that you have to do every time you're in Indianapolis, is book that reservation early to St. Elmo's. I will tell you who I saw walking through the restaurant: Jim Nantz and Tony Dungy. And I would imagine that Tony Dungy eats for free at St. Elmo's when he does go there. So
yeah,
that's just kind of the scene that you have when you're in Indianapolis, because this is essentially a convention for every single person involved in the NFL. You can see kind of Radio Row behind me right now with all the different media setups from the different markets around the country. Behind the curtains is the podium and podiums where all of the coaches will talk, and then as well as the prospects that go through here. And right now they're going through their media car washes, we like to call them. And we'll be talking to Ben Johnson in about a half hour, so that'll be exciting as well. So yeah, it's just the place where everyone's roaming around. You can kind of feel the buzz that a new season is starting. Then all the draft prospects will start to rifle in, and you kind of get familiar with who these guys are. Right now they're essentially just names, and then you hear them talk and you learn a little bit more about their stories. I was talking to Stacey Dales, who does NFL Network's on-field broadcasts, going through all the on-field drills, and she knows everything about every single prospect. She's like, yeah, it's kind of when you start getting to know the personalities behind who these prospects are, which right now people are just like, oh yeah, he might be a good pick at 10, he might be a good pick at 10, and they start to become like real human beings.
Cassie, we're going to hear from Ryan Poles in a bit. You had a chance to chat with him earlier today, but what I found interesting was the GM said it's a totally different feel these days, for the Bears at least. Does it feel any differently for you covering the Combine when talking to a Poles, getting ready to talk to Ben Johnson, talking to other reporters out there about where the Bears are today opposed to a year ago?
Well, a year ago, we were all reading into what Ryan Poles was saying about Justin Fields, and because Justin Fields was still on the roster at that time, and the potential of trading him and then sticking, obviously, with that #1 overall pick. And everyone knew at that point they were going to draft Caleb Williams. And I remember when Caleb Williams walked up to the podium talking to the national media for the first time. He hadn't been heard from since his end of college career in November, and he said, "Good morning." And it was like, oh, the narrative around him flipped right away. But the conversation the past 2 years has been all about the Bears, because they held on to those coveted #1 overall picks, traded it 2 years ago. So we were talking about the meetings behind closed doors with teams approaching Ryan Poles, asking what it would take for them to move up into the draft in that #1 slot. This year it seems much more mellow, but also more about Ben Johnson and what kind of role he is going to have in picking the personnel. We know that he is going to run this offense. We know he wanted to coach the Chicago Bears, and he said they are in win-now mode if they choose to be, depending on how hard they work. And he likes likes the pieces already on this roster. So I think it's learning how much say he will have in free agency and the pieces that they'll be able to add with the $79 million cap space that they already have, and then also in the draft with having 4 picks in the top 75. So I think that's what everyone is trying to get clued in on right now. But I would say Ryan Poles didn't say a whole lot when he talked to the media today, just that there's going to be a collaborative effort like there is every year. The only one thing that I thought he hinted at was when talking about the defensive line, because it's a strong draft class on both offense and defensive lines. And he said you need to have a strong defensive tackle to create pressure up the middle in order for your edge rushers to be successful. So I thought that was the only tidbit that maybe he hinted at something in a direction they might be thinking. But he also noted, free agency falls first, then the draft, and they're still working on setting up their draft board right now.
You mentioned, Cass, the opportunity you guys had last year. It was the first time a lot of folks got to look at Caleb Williams in person, hear from him in person. And it seemed like not only did he win over the Bears in Indianapolis, but a lot of the collective media who had an opportunity to, see him on the hoof and interact with him in person. So now we know the Bears aren't taking a quarterback this season, but because not only the number 10 pick, other picks in round number 2, are there players, are there positions then that you'll have your eye on as you're there all throughout the week, just trying to get a sense for where the Bears may go with their early draft picks?
Well, I think we're all looking at the offensive linemen because I think people believe that they will address that in free agency, whether that's one position, whether it's 2, and then just knowing that there's going to be some options available for them with that 10th overall pick, and maybe someone falls even to be available at 10. I think that's one position. I think, the defensive tackles are a position because we haven't seen the production consistently from a Jervon Dexter, and then also an edge rusher to play opposite of Montez Sweat. All those positions are a possibility. And then I think you might be able to speak to this a little bit more. The running back position group is something that's of intrigue because of the history of Ben Johnson and what he was able to do in Detroit with the tandem of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And we also know that when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, they were criticized highly for taking a running back in the first round. And then they have the last laugh when you're able to see Jahmyr Gibbs, take the majority of the carries when David Montgomery is hurt late in the season and still be successful in the run game, which allows them to do so much more with their offense. And then you think of what that could be a possibility in Chicago with a quarterback that has a higher ceiling than Jared Goff. And if he can tap into that a little bit more, maybe a running back is something they are looking at in round 3. So I think those are all the position groups that are of interest here. I know people are wondering if there's going to be a tight end that they're going to want to take because of Sam Laporta's role in Detroit. We know the offenses are going to be similar, but I think you're kind of drawing from things that Ben Johnson used with the tools he had to see if he wants to bring any of that personnel into Chicago.
Cassie, what I'd like to do right here is I want to hear from Ryan Poles, who, as you mentioned, had a chance to chat with the Chicago media earlier today.
We talked about this a lot within the search, having a clear vision of what every single position needs to have. Now, it's never going to be perfect. You can't have like a prototype at every single position, but as a front office, we want to be as close as possible with that. So his ability to really give a clear vision of what he wants and needs to be successful has been really, really good. And you can just tell the high football IQ is on a totally different level than what I've seen and been a part of before. We've had good conversations about this past year, but at the end of the day, that's going to be Ben's expertise. So let him do his thing and build a relationship, build trust, and coach him up. Some things, in the development of a young quarterback that you got to have, and I know that he's going to hit that first, and really to help him be the best professional football player he could possibly be. But I love the excitement from both Ben and from Caleb. I know he's eager to get started and work with Ben and get his career going in year 2.
All right, Ryan Poles' 3-year record as Bears GM, not good. 14-36, set the Bears record for consecutive losses, finished last in the NFC North all 3 seasons he's been GM. He still kept his job and was allowed, Cassie, to hire Ben Johnson, the top coaching candidate out there, at $13 million a season. Do you think Johnson will have more of a say in player personnel than Matt Eberflus did?
I think that's the question that we are all wondering. I would assume yes, because we had heard that Ben Johnson wanted to go to a place where he would have a say in personnel. I would also assume yes, just because of his background in having a top 3 offense the last 3 seasons, that he would be able to bring in some personnel that would complement his quarterback that he is going to be calling plays for and wanting to see the game through the same lens and all of that. So I would assume, especially on the offensive side of the ball, he is going to have say on what direction they want to go. They're constantly in different meetings. They are talking about what the prototype they want at each position. And then I think he's going to lean heavily on Dennis Allen for the defensive side, on his expertise, being a former head coach, being a well-respected defensive coordinator, on what pieces he wants. And he talked about not only, we know the Bears need another pass rusher. They need more pressure on the quarterback, but he talked about rushing coverage working together and having those lockdown corners to perform at a high level too consistently. So I think on the offensive side of the ball for sure, and I think he's going to lean heavily on Dennis Allen on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, Cassie, stand by, because I wanted to ask Anthony before we wrap up this first segment. When Poles says that Ben Johnson's IQ is on a totally different level, what's he saying? Because he actually said that it's on a level that it's something that he's never been part of throughout his career. This guy was part of a Kansas City Chiefs organization that had arguably one of the greatest offensive minds in Andy Reid. Matt Eberflus, say what you want, pretty good defensive mind. Yeah. What do you think he is saying when he's talking about Ben Johnson in such high regard?
Well, I'm wondering if that lens that he's viewing that through is specific to his time here in Chicago, because he certainly phrased it in a very macro sort of way. And I'd have a hard time believing that just in a couple of months of knowing Ben Johnson that he already views him in a similar regard or even beyond where he does with Andy Reid. But at the same time, when you hire a new coach, to be this impressed, you understand why Ryan Poles is willing to sort of communicate that to the public, because there's so much excitement. There's so much anticipation for what this Bears team can be, what this Bears offense can be if Ben Johnson can tap into getting the best out of Caleb Williams. So it's big praise. Yeah, I think we view it in the context of a new relationship and the excitement that Ryan Poles knows we all have.
All right, Cassie Carlson again is live in Indy. We'll get back to her in a second. We need to take our first break. Bears cut loose DeMarcus Walker last week, so will they get help through the draft or free agency on that defensive line? And what are the chances the Bears make a deal for Myles Garrett or Khalil Mack? Am I dreaming, my partner over here? We'll discuss next on Fox 32's Scouting for the Future. Welcome back. Lucas Oil Stadium there, home to the NFL Scouting Combine, which will take place through the weekend. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fox 32 NFL Combine Special, Scouting the Future. Lou Canellis, Anthony Herron's alongside. We are at our Fox 32 studios. Before I bring back Cassie Carlson, who's going to join us live from the Scouting Combine, you were part of the Combine back in 2001, not to age my
Way
friend
back
over
when,
here.
yeah, many moons ago.
But I want you to take me to the Combine as a player. When sizing up a player, looking at his college film, going through the interview process, tell me where the workout actually fits when you scrutinize and appraise a player.
When I was in the Combine in 01, it wasn't a TV product yet. That didn't even happen until a few seasons later when the NFL Network began to broadcast this nationally for everyone to see. And so we see that part of it on television now, but it's really a full week of activity. Certainly it's several days of activities where you're getting, a lot of times, this is the first opportunity that teams will have to meet these prospects in person, and especially because you've had folks in the player personnel office with your given team who've been evaluating the film. Perhaps they've had these chances to meet the players on campus. But now it's the first opportunity that Ben Johnson and this new Bears staff will have where they've been evaluating the film of the players for a few weeks at this point, and now they'll get that chance to see these prospects in person, go through interviews with them. And that's where, when you get a chance to make an impression with a team in person, that's where you can go from someone who the film is nice or the measurables are impressive to now being someone that they can picture in their organization. And that's one of the underappreciated aspects of the NFL Combine, to be in person with these players, because sure, the guys who are going to be drafted towards the top of the order somewhere, they'll get flown out for private workouts and get those in-person opportunities one-on-one. There are hundreds of players in Indianapolis right now that aren't going to get flown out to a facility for a team. So to take advantage of this, the in-person interviews, the written exams, the verbal interview exams, and then, of course, the physical toll that it takes by the end of the week, because you're all stressed out, you're sleep deprived, and then you get out there on the field at the end of the week. You've done your bench press, your Cybex test for the legs, and then you go out there. You're running, you're catching passes, you're jumping, you're doing everything, trying to let them know that what they see on film that they may like has an athleticism and a size and weight associated with what should lead to NFL success.
All right, I want to bring back Cassie Carlson. Cassie's live at the Combine in Indy. Cassie, Bears cut tight end Gerald Everett and defensive end DeMarcus Walker last week. Why, after talking to Ryan Poles, what did he say? Why didn't they fit into the new look Bears?
Yeah, what he had to say to those two getting cut was more so that they just didn't fit in with the new scheme, with the new coaches coming in, and I don't think the production was there with either player either. Mind you, Gerald Everett was someone who had a history playing with Shane Waldron in Seattle, so that's kind of why he came to Chicago, and forget how many catches he had. Was it 7 or 8? And he had like 15 penalty yards, so he didn't really amount to much. And then we always give the reference to DeMarcus Walker at his camp last summer, calling out himself having double-digit sacks this season. He finished with, I think, 3.5. So I don't think the production was there. I think that especially with it being a strong draft class on both the defensive line and the offensive line, but defensive line specifically, they feel like they can make a change and an addition through that, or maybe even free agency with some of the big edge rushers that are going to be on the market or available through trade. And then I think with the tight end position, they have Cole Kmet under contract after he signed that extension, but who else can they bring in as a tight end to be a pass catcher for Caleb Williams and kind of that safety net for him underneath for some of those dump-off passes? I would love to see Cole Kmet more involved in that, or another tight end it's just a natural fit for him to line up and be more of a receiver. So I think that's why. And he said the reason they did it now is so that they can talk with their agents. Their agents can get in front of other teams before all those spots fill up in free agency. So he felt like it was the respectable thing to do.
All right, I want to go back to the defensive side of the football. Here was Poles earlier today addressing the Bears' defensive line, and if he was looking for help on the inside or on the edge.
I would say it's been consistent. You really need interior, someone to really puncture the pocket from the interior for the exterior to be successful and productive as well. So it's that balance of the two. It's a big puzzle. Free agency comes first. There's a lot of unknowns in the draft in terms of who's going to be there for you. I've talked about that before. You can have philosophical beliefs in how you build a football team, how you prioritize, but the supply has to match the needs, and those opportunities have to present themselves at the right time. So we're starting to put that puzzle piece together. But what I like about really the pairing so far of free agency and the draft is I do believe that the supply of players are matching our needs. So there's going to be good opportunities.
Big A, were you surprised they dumped DeMarcus Walker?
Honestly was. Gerald Everett didn't surprise me at all because, to Cassie's point, he just wasn't productive, and especially when given opportunities more so early in the season than late. He just didn't have a good season. DeMarcus Walker, I thought on the whole played well as a guy who was, the defensive end opposite Montez Sweat. Obviously not a game wrecker, but a guy who played hard, who stuffed the run pretty effectively as well.
And a guy they could have moved inside.
Exactly. In certain pass rush scenarios, they would move him into that three technique position. He gives them some scheme versatility that you love having for defensive lines. And you want to come at opponents in waves. So maybe they felt like the cap number that's there for DeMarcus Walker didn't necessarily fit where they saw him sort of slotting into the new scheme run by Dennis Allen. But Dennis Allen, man, I was around him early in his time in the NFL during my time in Atlanta with the Falcons. He's coached a few different schemes over his years. You can never really have enough effective defensive linemen. So DeMarcus Walker, releasing him, that did surprise me a bit. Gerald Everett, not so much.
Cassie, Bears have 8 draft picks, 3 amongst the top 41. We've talked about it before. They're projected to have the 4th most salary cap space in the league. In other words, they have money to go shopping. What did polls say about hitting the free agent market?
Well, that the supply is in line with their demands. And he was asked specifically about Trey Smith, which is the biggest name in this free agent class, the right guard out of Kansas City. He didn't want to talk about him. He said he only talks about players that are on his current roster, but did say he was proud to be part of that draft process back when he was drafted to Kansas City. So I think that's the huge one that's looming right now. And if the Bears are going to be aggressive in free agency because they have the $79 million to do so. But then you did just hear Chiefs GM Brett Veach say that they feel very optimistic about their ability to keep Trey Smith as well. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. I kind of think Poles didn't want to say much because he doesn't want to up the price tag on him if it gets into a bidding war.
Yeah, that makes sense. Getting back to the defensive side of the football, I know there's been some scuttlebutt out there about a potential Myles Garrett trade market. I think the Bears would be fools to give up the draft capital that it would take to get a Myles Garrett. Khalil Mack, on the other hand, 34 years old, but if he can still give you 6 to 8 sacks and you can get him at a good deal, I'm not sure that's a bad move.
Again, thinking of the depth, the Bears it'll benefit the Bears to have youth on the defensive line and production there, and you can try to continue to look for that in the draft. But Khalil Mack getting into his mid-30s, still a productive pass rusher. If the number is right, I could see that potential. Myles Garrett ain't happening. Khalil Mack for the right number, perhaps, but he's a guy who's still been productive into his 30s here. So I think his number is going to be, probably a bit bigger than the Bears are hoping for.
All right, we need to take a break. Coming up, does Ryan Poles see Braxton Jones keeping his starting spot at left tackle? And what are the chances the Bears trade up to take Penn State's Abdul Carter? We will discuss next. Welcome back to Scouting for the Future. Live look, Lucas Oil Field. That's where they are hosting the NFL Scouting Combine. Matter of fact, let's bring back Cassie Carlson for this last segment. Cassie is live in Indy as well. And I want to ask Big A first, you know what? I want to hear from GM Ryan Poles from earlier today, because Poles talked about left tackle Braxton Jones.
I think Braxton did a good job. Obviously, you never want guys to go through injuries, and we got to see how he comes on the other side of this. I know everything's been progressing and on schedule, and he's doing a good job with that. He's been very active with rehabbing and get back on his feet. So I think, again, that's another spot where it's going to be competition, and you build the best five, or the line with the best five guys. So we'll see how that goes through this offseason and training camp.
All right, Jones missed the final 2 weeks of the season, suffered a gruesome ankle injury, required surgery. Big A, knowing how Poles feels about Braxton Jones, do you think that Ryan Poles is looking more for a guard or a tackle in this draft?
My anticipation going in, because of the way that some of the top offensive tackles in this draft cycle are being evaluated right now, that you have a chance to get a high-level tackle here with the #1 pick, or with your number 10 pick in the first round. Then from there, you can maybe go veteran on the interior of your offensive line. And I personally haven't even ruled out the idea that Coleman Shelton could return as the center again for this coming season. So on the interior, you got some veteran options, but I think on the edge, go ahead and at least view it as depth, because even if Braxton Jones is back next season, you can't count on him from game one. And to have some depth and the opportunity to upgrade that spot is something the Bears should pursue.
Cassie, take me to the other side of the football. Bears absolutely need a warlord opposite Montez Sweat. Any chance, and I know it's a big wish here, any chance they'd swing for the fences and trade up to #1 and grab Abdul Carter?
I don't think so. You said you didn't want to mortgage the future for Myles Garrett, so I think you got to play it safe on that one too. Although, we all saw him single-handedly win games with one arm in the playoffs, so that was impressive. I think you're more hoping that someone like Mason Graham could potentially drop the D tackle out of Michigan that's pro-ready, but because it is a deep draft class, I don't think they're going to trade up. If anything, maybe we see Poles go back to his roots of trading back a few spots, depending on how the quarterbacks fall, and that's the more likely scenario, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. My next question was, would it surprise you if they traded back, picked up another pick or two, and grabbed a defensive tackle in this deep draft for D tackles?
No, I think that's the exciting part about going into the draft, because really once the Cam Wards or Shadur Sanders, if those two go early on before 10, because the Bears still have a high draft pick being in the top 10, then I think it changes everything. And then you have those teams starting to panic a little bit more, and I think that's when guys start to fall. Another name, though, if you're going offensive line, is Will Campbell, because they go through their measurables here, and people are saying, well, he has short arms. So if he falls, the LSU tackle, I think that's an option for the Bears to take him at 10 as well.
By the way, Will Campbell, if he's there, is that the man you're grabbing?
He is, and I think he's got a great combination, the size that Cassie's talking about, and he's just so physical with how he plays the game. And if we learn anything about that Detroit Lions offense, we know Ben Johnson recognizes what the run game, what a dominant run game can do to enhance the productivity of your quarterback. And that was with a veteran, and not even, you consider coming in and having a young QB here with the Bears. Will Campbell is the best option for that. There's several guys, though. Oregon's Josh Connerly is a really good prospect. Josh Simmons out of Ohio State hasn't played left tackle as much, but you look at this past season, he ended up playing only about a month and a half as a starter for the Buckeyes. He was in and out of the lineup a bit the previous season, was good as a right tackle at San Diego State. So he's a little bit more of a projection for an NFL left tackle, but there's some good options that would all be worthy of top 10 picks.
All right, Cassie Carlson, terrific work in Indy. She's going to have a chance to sit down and talk with Bears head coach Ben Johnson. Don't forget, tune in tomorrow and Thursday. The next 2 days, we'll continue our combine coverage from Indianapolis. Our show, Scouting the Future, 1 o'clock on Fox Local. If you tune in late or you just want to see it again, you can catch it in its entirety on our YouTube channel or fox32chicago.com. Have a good day.
see you back here at 4.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fox 32 NFL Combine Special, Scouting the Future. My name is Luke Canellis. Joining me, as always, during the football season, my Bears Game Day Live and Bears Blitz partner, Anthony Herron. Great